Hello everyone, my name is J.E. Marie and welcome to Soul, also known as Student of Life. Today our prompt question is, are you healthy? Now let's get into it. Now the World Health Organization describes health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Now, by this definition, we know that health is comprised of multiple categories that apply to the person living in everyday modern society. And if you guys see me looking down, I'm just looking at my notes that I wrote for this video. Now, I broke down health in these categories so that we can get a general understanding. But before we even get started, the reason why I'm asking this question is because the end-all be-all is that everything is connected. Each one of these categories are connected to paint a bigger picture of your health. This being said, they're all very important. There's not one that's more important than the other. Now let's go ahead and get into it. So I outlined these categories as physical health, mental emotional health, social health, environmental health, and financial health. So that we have an understanding in terms of what we're talking about today, I am going to give a good amount of definition today, so strap in, but I promise it'll all make sense by the end of the video. Now, physical health is much more self-explanatory. It's the one that most of us know the most, and it's described as conditioning of the body and proper functioning of the organism. So these would include components like sleep, nutrition, diet, as well as your ability to fight illnesses. So all of these things together, as well as other things, help to paint a picture of how well your physical health is doing. Now, the definition that is given for mental health is a lot more loaded. And so it is described as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes their own ability, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, that's key, and is able to make a contribution to one's community. Now again, I'm going to read it again just for clarity. A state of well-being in which the individual realizes their own ability, it can cope with normal stress of life, the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to one's community. So because the definition is so loaded, what I put for components were cognition, emotional processing and expression, and your overall behavior, because I feel like these things really just kind of encompass that whole definition very well. Now, the next one is social health. And the definition that we were given for social health is the ability to create healthy and fulfilling relationships. So based on that definition, we know that social health is completely dependent on connection with others and closely connected to emotional regulated skills, which is what we talked about in mental health. Now, we can already see how these things are starting to tie in together and how they overlap, but let's keep going. So technically speaking, environmental health is a branch of public health. So it is concerned with monitoring factors in the environment that affect the human self and the human health. So these can be components like air quality, visual pollution, social structures like work or family, and general safety. So these are all components of the environmental health. And I do want to add in that even though environmental health is a subset of public health, your individual environment most definitely your individual environment definitely impacts your own individual health in terms of mentally and physically and emotionally and all of that. So keep that in mind, even though it is a branch of public health. Now the next one, and the last one, is financial health. That one is pretty much in the title, but it describes the state of one's personal monetary affairs. So these components include things like your income, your expenses, your savings, your general spending habits, as well as investments that one would make. So if you made it this far in the video, you're probably sitting there like, Jay, I could have Googled all of these definitions. What is the point of this video? Well, like I said at the very beginning, all of these healths are put together like a puzzle to create an overall image of your health. And this means that leaving one area unattended can very easily boil over to any other part of your life. And sometimes it could snowball into something much bigger than you ever wanted it to be. Now, so with that being said, I really think it's important to stress that health in and of itself is no singular health in and of itself is no singular level or goal that someone should aim to achieve. It's about maintenance. It's about balance and maintenance, because these are things that we do in our everyday life. Reiterate, health is no singular level or goal to be achieved. It's about balance and maintenance. Now, I'm going to give some examples. Some I've heard from other people, some things that I've heard from myself, or some things I've experienced myself, but just keep them in mind. It's very important just to keep these in mind. So for the first example that I'm going to give, we're going to start off with a woman. She is married, and she wasn't super into physical fitness. That was not her goal. Her physical activity mostly consisted of leaving the house to go to work, which was a desk job, and going for walks when she would talk to her brother. Now, one day her brother died, and this took a huge toll all over her life, just all over. She did begin to see a therapist. She did begin going to church more to try to build up her faith. She did all of these things to try to cope, like most of us do. And the one main thing that changed in her life, other than her brother dying, she no longer left the house. She started working from home. This was not during the pandemic, by the way. She started working from home, and she never left the house because she wasn't on the phone with her brother anymore. And she just spent most of her time sitting down. She began to eat her emotions. She didn't go to the doctor as much anymore. So there was no one to tell her that her cholesterol was too high, that she was gaining too much weight, that basically her life was slowly shifting. Now, remember, she is married. So her husband did try to be as supportive as possible throughout this time. But time goes on, and it's about 2 years later. She has gained at least 50 pounds. And she has no libido at all. The thing is that her husband is still very much attracted to her, still very much loves her, but she has not taken care of her mental or her physical health to really want to move forward in life 2 years after her brother has died. Now, her husband has a hard time addressing this because it wasn't his brother that died. Even though he did feel for her, he wanted to support her and still get his needs met. The problem here is that he just stayed silent. And as things began to progress, 6 months later, she stopped seeing her therapist, was no longer going to church, was no longer leaving the house, period. She said it would be lucky if she left the house once a month. So she just wasn't moving. So these things affected her mental health and her physical health even more. And her libido was very, very low. And she gained even more weight. And she began speaking about how her work health completely declined and her work productivity completely declined, and how when she would be in meetings, there would often be complaints about her attentiveness to the project, and that people often felt like she just didn't care about the work that she was doing. Even though this may not be true, it could have been, because she did state in her own words that she did not have the energy to focus. So when you don't have the energy to focus, you really don't have the energy to care. Now, I do understand that losing somebody takes a big toll. It takes a huge, huge toll. But we don't die with those people. And it's very, very important to be able to kind of look back and decide, okay, how long am I going to let this pattern continue? So yes, she no longer had the want to. And 3 years later, so this is now 5.5 to 6 years later, her husband divorces her, marries his secretary, excuse me, and as she was telling this story, I could see how her life began to decline, and maybe this is something that needed to happen so that she could kind of wake up. But I'm not saying that the death is what needed to happen. But in the end, she got more physically active than she was before. After the divorce, she started painting. She started going for walks. She moved to Napa County, bought a house, and lived by herself in the woods. She lived in her own house in the woods, but there were other neighbors that she had, and she would go for walks, she would talk to them, there was a bunch of livestock. She was genuinely more happy than she was before her brother died, when the only time she would really get out of the house was go for a walk and talk to her brother. So that story did have a lot of components. So if anyone's struggling with grief, definitely seek help. Definitely seek help. Definitely seek help if it's something you're struggling with. There are normal processes. There are a lot of parts to it, and there is no timeline. However, it is very, very important to think about where you're headed in your life. So if she had not gotten the divorce, and if her husband had continued to try to support her, because that's what he thought he was doing. If I leave her alone in her grief, then she'll just get over it. He thought he was supporting her, but he wasn't. So if there had never been a divorce, there may have never been a reason for her to look at herself and decide, hey, why is my life going this way? Did it have to end in divorce? I personally don't think so, but then the world works in strange ways, and maybe it is something that needed to happen for her, again, to kind of wake up. But the point of this video is, do not let it get to that point to where there's destruction. Don't let it get to the point to where there's health, or where your health is, your physical health is compromised, or where you can't think straight. So I guess I do want to give another example. For the example that I would like to give, there was someone who, basically, very similar situation. This person only had one friend, and they were their closest friend. But this person, they called themselves an introvert, when in reality, they were very outgoing. Not to say that an introvert can't be outgoing, but they kind of rationalize, oh, I don't do these things, this, that, and the third, because I'm an introvert. When in reality, they had never learned before. So this person had a lot of trouble in terms of not finding work, but keeping work, because they weren't really outspoken. They would kind of keep their head down and do their jobs, which is really hard in a job where you have to work on projects. And one day the friend that they had, the one friend, moved out of the country. And it left them there by themselves, essentially feeling abandoned, even though they logically understood that this person is just moving forward with their lives. They didn't leave them. They didn't die. This person in and of themselves felt like they were abandoned. But they convinced themselves, oh, I'm just an introvert. I can handle this. And they kept moving forward. Time kept going by. Another work productivity began to decline. And then as time went on, this man noticed that women would approach him, but he would just turn away. He would just turn away. He'd smile, he'd laugh, and just leave. Just leave whatever setting. He did tell a story about how one time he was having lunch and a woman came up in the middle of his lunch. He literally put money on the table, said, hello, I pray you're well, and then left in the middle of him eating lunch because he was so uncomfortable with speaking with people. Now, this goes on for literally over a year. He ends up quitting his job and finding a job where he doesn't have to talk to people. I think it was some kind of data input job. He basically doesn't have to communicate face-to-face with anybody. And that's what he did until one day he just didn't want to get out of bed. He just didn't want to move. He had no inclination to do so. None. And his emergency contact was his mother. His work, because he wasn't reporting to work, his work called his mother, and his mother ended up having him committed because she was so concerned for his well-being. Now, he went through that. I'm not going to speak about any specifics for privacy reasons why he went through that. And then when he came out of it, he made a decision to himself, like, I'm going to try something different. And one of the things he tried was, I'm going to try to have at least a 30-second conversation. 30 seconds. And if I don't feel like escaping by that point, maybe I can try to move forward. So that's where he started. He decided to start off small because he had never been someone who considered themselves outgoing. Now, this 30 seconds began to turn into 60 seconds, turned into 5 minutes. And then literally 6 months later, he has a group of friends that he meets regularly. Some married, some not, some men, some women, people that he never thought that he himself would be able to relate to. But he had to start small. And it didn't start until his mother had him committed. Okay, sorry, camera cut out. Now, both of these stories start out with a person losing somebody and their health declining in such a way that they are then forced to make a decision, either to change or to continue to decline to worse situations. Now, again, let's keep in mind the whole point of this video. Every aspect of your health is connected. Each part. Your environmental, your social, your work, your mental, your physical, everything is connected to make the bigger picture. So I really think it's important that we know that health is no singular level. It is not a goal to achieve. It's something that needs to be maintained, and it's a balance that has to be maintained. So let's say this again. Health is not a goal to be achieved. It is a balance to be maintained, because something off over here can trigger something over there, which in turn can cause this to go down, and then now we're in a whirlwind. In both of these stories that I have told, it wasn't just one thing after the other, one day after the other. It was mostly about how things can evolve over time. So again, if there's one area of your life that is not where you want it to be, do something about it. Do something about it. You can't tackle everything all at once, but you can do one thing today. So again, let's say it again. Health is no singular goal. It is a balance to be maintained. Now, I hope that this video helped whoever came across it. Again, I am J.E. Marie, and I wish you the best on your SOL journey. Bye.